All right, guys. So we're going to talk about arson investigation, and you've already seen this a little bit with the web activity that we've done. But some main things that we need to keep an eye out for when we're doing our final assignment, which is to assess someone's house for arson and what may have happened. So the first things that we need to do here are define what arson is. It is a criminal act of deliberately setting fire to a property. Now, there are a couple reasons that this might happen. Could be for revenge. Could be pyromania. Somebody just loves setting fires, watching stuff burn. Could be vandalism for a variety of reasons. Insurance fraud, trying to collect insurance money. It could be done to conceal a crime. So a murder or a serious crime that there might be evidence in the house or in the building. So that could be a cause. All right, so in terms of classifying arson, if you deliberately set a fire that results in, or that is in an occupied home or building, so this is basically considered a violent crime. It's first-degree arson because somebody could become seriously injured or even die. If it's an unoccupied building, that is typically referred to as second-degree arson and therefore a non-violent crime. And if it's a vacant area like a field or forest fire, that is considered third degree. Okay, so there are a couple different reasons that something would not be arson. So what are the most common causes for a fire to just be, accidental? So cooking is probably the main one. It's almost 50% of all house fires are caused by fires in the kitchen, just somebody forgetting to pay attention to, something they've got on the stove. Maybe walk out of the room and then, don't check on it quickly enough. Another one that can happen at any point is a short in wiring. So like when you have two live wires close to each other, there's a little arc that happens. And that produces a lot of heat, and if that's happening inside of your walls, it can catch the drywall or the wood studs on fire, and so that can lead to a house fire or any fire, any building fire. Someone smoking frequently, someone falls asleep with a cigarette on the couch or in bed or something like that, can light the bed on fire or light the couch on fire. Candles are a common one. So that's pretty obvious and self-explanatory. Space heaters are another one. So you might have a space heater, or where in this case you have a picture of a space heater where some curtains have gotten in front of it, they catch fire, and you've got a big problem. And then another one is lightning. So lightning strike can actually cause house fires and does cause house fires. Obviously lightning can be thousands of degrees, and so if it strikes a wooden structure or any flammable structure, it can cause very, very big problems. And then finally, kids playing with matches. It does happen. If small children are playing around with matches in the house, that can lead to some serious problems. All right, so what's so hard about investigating arson? One thing that is difficult is that the evidence is often going to be lost in the fire or washed away by water used to extinguish the fire. So, that's pretty straightforward. That's the whole point of arson for crime concealment, is because it burns away the evidence that you're trying to hide. So the fire itself is going to take care of that evidence. Also, if someone is an arsonist, they're setting the fire and getting out of there, and they're probably planning to do it at a time when it's not going to be noticed for a couple minutes, if not a couple hours. So it's pretty easy to conceal. Another thing that can make things difficult, because in arson you're often looking for the presence or the use of an accelerant. So gasoline or lighter fluid or kerosene or something like that. And sometimes that flammable residue is there for reasons other than arson. And a good example of that, if you were paying attention to the Cameron Todd Willingham case, the guy who was falsely convicted of killing his children in a house fire that was set on purpose. or that he was convicted to have set on purpose. One of the big pieces of evidence was that they found traces of lighter fluid residue in one of the door thresholds, and so they investigated, and once they found the lighter fluid, it was in the kitchen door, the front door, and it turned out though that there was actually a barbecue grill on the front porch. So having a lighter fluid residue that close to the front porch was not unusual at all, and definitely not necessarily a sign of arson. So there's all kinds of things that can happen that might lead investigators to falsely rule something as arson. Okay, this was discussed in the online activity that we did, but just to make sure that everybody's clear on this is the fire triangle. So these are the three things that a fire needs in order to start and to continue, to be maintained. And if you take away any one of these, you can think of it as a three-legged stool. If you knock out any one of these legs, the fire topples over, the fire goes out. The first is fuel. So something has to burn, right? So clothing, wood, accelerant, etc., that can all be the fuel. Then we think about heat. So there has to be a significant or a sufficient amount of heat to allow combustion to happen. So even combustible materials don't just ignite without the addition of heat, and it usually leads to a chain reaction. So that's why it only takes a spark to ignite, let's say gasoline, because it's flammable enough that small amount of heat in a small area in a sample of gasoline causes the reaction to start, and that reaction is exothermic, so it gives off heat, gives off more heat and burns the rest of the gasoline. And so this is what they're actually taking away when they bring the fire trucks and the fire hoses and hook up to the fire extinguisher. When they spray that water on the fire, they're not suffocating the fire. They're not taking away the oxygen. Water is really good at absorbing heat. And so by adding water to the fire, you're absorbing the heat and bringing it down to the point where you've knocked out that heat leg of the stool, so to speak. Oxygen. Of course, you need oxygen for combustion. Normally, the atmosphere, of course, has about 20% oxygen. The rest is mostly nitrogen. Fire will go out if it falls below about 16%, which is why keeping doors closed or closing doors when there's a fire will slow down, if not stop that fire. Closing doors and windows, because that fire needs to keep up that 16% or more oxygen, and if it doesn't, it'll just put itself out if it doesn't have a constant source of oxygen. Okay, and then this is what you're really going to be looking at in our project that we do for the final, or on our assignment that we're going to do on the final exam day. Looking for patterns to try to figure out that it was arson and kind of figure out the rest of the story. So some important patterns. One to look out for is a V pattern. This usually points to the source of the fire, and it's not strictly going to look exactly like a V. But for example, if we look at this photograph here, it's more or less a V pattern. If we look at the charring on the wall, it kind of looks like a V. But and it does point to, probably what caused this was an electrical failure in the little baseboard heater there. So that makes a lot of sense, and that probably was not arson. This happens a lot of times with electrical fires that stem from wall outlets. The wall outlet will be the point of the V, and that will tell you that there was a short in the outlet, and therefore, that's what caused the fire. Another one to look for is an inverted V. So this is where you're going to be wider at the floor, so you can see it's happening in just the opposite way. This may, not necessarily, but may indicate that an accelerant was used that was poured on the floor. To have that broad base where there's so much more heat down at the ground than there is up higher, since heat rises, the only way for that to really happen is if you have either a rug or something very low to the ground, or a pool of accelerant right near the wall that is burning. So that's what an inverted V is going to look like. Streamers, don't have a picture of this one, but it's pretty straightforward. It's literally just a trail of fire. So if you have what looks like many sources of ignition that are all throughout a house, like all the way down a hallway, that's almost certainly going to be arson. That's going to be somebody dragging or dripping gasoline and igniting it throughout the house, or carrying something and dropping it, little bits of paper or something like that, as they walk through the house, causing the fire to spread quickly. And that's not generally something that's going to happen on its own or on accident. Another one to look for is pooling. So pooling is going to be where you have burn marks in the middle of the floor. This is a great indicator that you might have an accelerant being used, because there's not a whole lot of other reasons that you would have just a burn mark right in the middle of the floor. It's not going to be probably from an outlet going bad, obviously. And it's really hard to ignite a surface like a wooden floor. If you've ever tried to start a fire before, there's just not enough surface area there. If you try to, start a fire in the middle of a big flat piece of wood, it's not going to work. You need lots of surface area. So the middle of a floor is not a great way to get a fire started unless it has gasoline or some other accelerant poured onto it. So those are some patterns to look for when we do our investigation. It's going to look a little different every time, so they're not always going to look exactly like this. But when you give your reason for why you think something was arson and where it started, these are some things that you can be looking for.